Play the role of devoted wife for 6 months. Help secure his grandmother's blessing for the merger, and walk away with enough money to save her sister's life. Simple, transactional, safe. She had no idea that Marcus Chen's one condition, the clause he'd added in his own handwriting, at the bottom of page 7, would unravel everything she thought she knew about love, sacrifice, and the walls people build around their hearts. Elena's hands trembled as she held the hospital bill. $200,000. The numbers blurred through her tears, but their meaning remained devastatingly clear. Without a bone marrow transplant, her 12-year-old sister Sophie had 6 months to live. Maybe less. "I'm sorry, Miss Rivera," the financial counselor said, not unkindly. "Without insurance or upfront payment, we can't schedule the procedure." Elena nodded mechanically, folding the paper into her purse next to the eviction notice and the rejection letter from her third loan application. At 26, she'd already survived foster care, put herself through community college, and built a modest career as an executive assistant. She'd thought hard work and determination could overcome anything. She'd been wrong that evening. She sat at her desk on the 42nd floor of Chen Industries, staring at the Seattle skyline as the sun set behind the Olympic Mountains. She should have left an hour ago, but going home meant facing Sophie's hopeful eyes, and Elena didn't know how to tell her little sister that hope wasn't enough. "You're still here." The voice made her jump. Marcus Chen stood in the doorway of his office, his tie loosened and his dark hair slightly disheveled, the only signs that he was human, rather, than the ice-cold billionaire the media portrayed him as. "Just finishing some reports, Mr. Chen Date." He studied her with those unnerving dark eyes that seemed to see too much. "You've been crying. It wasn't a question." Elena quickly wiped her face. "Personal matter. It won't affect my work." "I know it won't. You're the most competent assistant I've ever had, buddy," he paused. "Which is why I'm going to make you an unusual proposition." Elena's stomach tightened. In the 6 months she'd worked for Marcus Chen, he'd been nothing but professional. But she'd heard stories about powerful men and the vulnerable women who worked for them. As if reading her mind, he added, "Nothing inappropriate. I need a wife, temporarily." She blinked. "Excuse me?" Marcus walked to the window, hands in his pockets. "My grandmother is dying. She's the only family I have left, and her final wish is to see me married before she passes. There's also the matter of a merger with the Zhang Corporation. They're traditional, and my bachelor status concerns them. 6 months. You'd live in my penthouse, attend events as my wife, and convince a dying woman that her grandson finally found love." He turned to face her. "In exchange, I'll pay you $500,000. The room spun. $500,000. Sophie's transplant, the medical bills, a fresh start. Everything they needed? "Oh, why me?" Elena whispered. "Because you're honest. Because you work harder than anyone I know. And because you need the money badly enough to take this seriously, but you're not the type to try and make it permanent." Or his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "I saw the hospital bills on your desk last week. I know about your sister, huh?" Shame and hope warred in Elena's chest. "That's private, and—" "I'm offering you a solution. Think about it." She didn't need to think. "What's the catch?" "There's always a catch." Marcus handed her a contract. "Read Section 7, subsection C, the clause I added myself, day." Elena flipped through the pages, her heart pounding. Most of it was standard confidentiality agreements, public appearance requirements, social media guidelines. Then she found it. Handwritten in elegant script at the bottom of page 7. The contracted party, Elena Rivera, agrees to 1 home-cooked dinner per week, shared together at the residence dining table. All electronic devices must be turned off for the duration. Minimum time, 1 hour. She looked up, confused. "I don't understand. You want me to cook dinner?" "And I want you to share dinner. Whether you cook, I cook, or we order takeout doesn't matter." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I haven't sat down to a real meal with another person in 3 years. Not since my parents died. I've forgotten what it feels like to have someone ask about my day, to talk about something besides quarterly earnings and stock projections." If I'm going to lie to my grandmother, if I'm going to tell her I found someone who makes life worth living, then maybe I should remember what that actually feels like. He met her eyes. Even if it's just pretend in that moment, Elena saw past the designer suits in the corner office, past the Forbes covers and the reputation for ruthless business deals. She saw a man who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten what it felt like to be human. 1 dinner a week, he said softly. For 6 months. That's the condition. Break it, and the contract is void. Elena thought of Sophie, of the way her sister still believed. In fairy tales, despite everything life had thrown at them. She thought of this lonely man who had everything except what mattered most. When do I start? The first month was awkward. Elena moved into the guest wing of Marcus's downtown penthouse, and they maintained a careful distance, except for public appearances and their weekly dinners. At charity galas, Marcus's hand would rest on her lower back with practiced ease. They smiled for cameras, and Elena wore designer dresses she'd only dreamed of touching. But it was the Thursday dinners that changed everything. The first week, they ate takeout sushi in uncomfortable silence. The second week, Marcus asked about Sophie, and Elena found herself talking for 20 minutes about her sister's love of astronomy and terrible jokes. The third week, Marcus told her about the pressure of running a company his grandfather built from nothing, the weight of all those expectations. By the second month, Elena was cooking her grandmother's recipes from Mexico that she'd learned before entering foster care. Marcus started leaving work early on Thursdays. They talked about books, about childhood dreams, about the small moments that make life meaningful. You know what's strange? Marcus said one evening, twirling pasta on his fork. This is the only hour of my week that feels real. Everything else is performance. Elena's heart ached. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe you've been performing for so long, you forgot how to stop, or maybe I needed someone to give me permission to be human again. When they visited his grandmother at the estate in the San Juan Islands, Elena expected to feel guilty about the deception. Instead, she found herself genuinely charmed by the sharp-witted woman who saw right through them. You don't love him yet, grandmother, Chen said when they were alone in the garden. But you will. I see how you look at him when he's not watching, like you're discovering something precious you thought was lost. Mrs. Chen, he's been alone too long. So have you. The old woman squeezed her hand. Sometimes the best things in life start as transactions. What matters is what we choose to build from them. The fourth month brought complications. The Zhang merger was finalized. Sophie's transplant was scheduled. And Elena realized she wasn't acting anymore. She loved the way Marcus left sticky notes with terrible puns on her bathroom mirror. She loved how he called Sophie every week to hear her awful astronomy jokes. She loved watching his face soften when he thought no one was looking, loved the man he was becoming as those walls came down, and it terrified her. The contract ends in 2 months, she said one Thursday, pushing her untouched food around her plate. Sophie's doing well, the merger is complete. We've accomplished what we set out to do. Marcus set down his fork carefully. Is that what you want? To end this? I want... Elena's voice broke. I want to know if any of this is real. If these dinners mean something, or if I'm just convenient, if you'll miss me when I'm gone, or if you'll just find another assistant. Another contract, okay, Elena. Because I've broken the cardinal rule of fake relationships. Marcus, I fell in love with you, and I don't know if you're capable of loving me back by. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Then Marcus stood, walked around the table, and knelt beside her chair. I fired my lawyer last week, he said quietly. Do you know why? She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Because he suggested we renew your contract for another 6 months. And I realize I don't want a contract. I don't want clauses and conditions and expiration dates. He took her hands. I want Thursday dinners for the rest of my life. I want to teach Sophie constellation names badly. I want to wake up next to you and know it's real. Not pretend, his voice cracked. You didn't just remind me how to be human. Elena, you made me want to be worthy of someone as extraordinary as you. You already are, she whispered. You always were. You just needed someone to see it. When Marcus kissed her, Elena tasted salt from both their tears. Somewhere in the past 4 months, between shared meals and quiet conversations, between performative affection and genuine connection, they'd built something neither of them had been looking for. Something real. 6 months after signing the contract, Elena stood in the same hospital where she'd once received devastating news. But this time, she was watching Sophie laugh with the transplant team, healthy and vibrant and full of life. Marcus stood beside her, his arm around her waist, not for cameras, not for appearances, but because that's where he belonged. Your grandmother would have loved this, Elena said softly. She knew. Marcus smiled. She always knew. That evening, they sat down to dinner in the penthouse, not because a contract required it, but because they'd built a life around these small, sacred moments. Elena had learned that the grandest gestures weren't about money or power. They were about showing up, about choosing to be present, about having the courage to let someone see you as you truly are. And Marcus had learned that sometimes the best business deals are the ones where everyone wins, especially when you're willing to invest in something that can't be measured in quarterly earnings or stock prices. Sometimes, the most valuable thing you can offer someone is simply your time, your honesty, and your heart. Everything else is just a contract waiting to be fulfilled. But love? Love is what happens when you stop performing and start living. And it turns out, that's worth more than any merger, any fortune, any carefully constructed empire. Because at the end of every day, what matters most is having someone to share dinner with, someone who makes you remember what it means to be beautifully, vulnerably, perfectly human.